Yay. That's
All
it.
right.
We are live. Hello. Hey,
Hello.
Lau. Thanks for joining today and going with me through this episode is again for me jet lag episode. So I'm really happy that one brain of two of us is functioning. So that's you.
Oh no, it's way too much responsibility for the first time live on stream.
But I feel quite confident because you've been working on MCP stuff for the last, I don't know, 3-4 weeks. How long has it been? You were one of the first one. You were one of the first one who brought this topic up in our office conversations. I remember.
Yeah, so I built a first version for MCP for one of our prototypes back in November. There's actually a video on our channel, I think, that sort of narrates on how to when we were building the local studio for querying your endpoints and inspecting traces. MCP came out, I think, in around, I'm going to say November, October, I think November of last year. And it was like an interesting, it only worked with Cloud Desktop. You only had the local standard in and out based sort of transports, all of that. So, but it felt like, oh, I can build an extension for this thing and I can hook it up to our thing. And yeah, it was like a couple of days and then we sort of did a video. Yeah, it was a fun video to do because like I remember doing it in the middle of it. It felt like I'm just giving a bunch of these tools to the language model, and then it does a whole bunch of things. So it was like, oh, it just figured out this problem, or it's like which was sort of happened live on stream. But that's one of those things that you discover building these. Yeah.
So, but this also is fair to say you were there already in the MCP space before it became a buzz, because now if you look up in the AI space, everything is MCP and people are really excited about it. Maybe we should give a little bit of context what MCP is. So, because it's still relatively, well, since November, I would still consider new as a model context protocol. And I think that helps AI tools, like you can give it an AI agent, for example, and the protocol defines tools that the agent then can use. So it's a little bit, it is more powerful. Like, please correct me if I'm wrong. It's not that you only give your agent an API, so to say, with endpoints that it can call, but you really define the usage of tools inside your protocol. So the agent can, for example, if you have to find a calculator, use exactly that tool to calculate, for example, 2 numbers. Would you say that is well described, or do you have a better way of describing it?
Yeah. So my way of thinking of it is like model the MCP servers, which is the naming is somewhat confusing, but if we sort of put it into names, there's MCP sort of always has a client-server relationship. The client is almost always part of the host, so usually that's either Cloud Desktop or Cursor, wherever you're typing in the chat window and you're interfacing that's the little piece, that's the client, or the host that establishes a client relation with the MCP server. The server can be either local, as I mentioned earlier, or it can be, which is now sort of, and what we're probably going to do today is all remote. The key thing about it is whenever you're developing agents or you want to give them tools, and rather than having to re-implement the tool definition and tool implementation for every single agent, the idea of MCP is that I can sort of, as let's say a website or an application owner, I can describe these tools in a standardized format and then sort of put it out there for the world so that any agent developer can just sort of point it to that URL and tell the LLM to sort of figure out how to do this. You know this format, you recognize it, go nuts. And so it's a way to essentially bundle up the tools as effectively as an extension. That's my usually.
As an extension, and I don't know if the API still makes sense. It's like the open, or it's like the API spec for the agent to know what he can do on the external or with an external server.
Yeah. There's actually, I think the tools case is probably the most commonly sort of used feature of the model context protocol. But it has other stuff. I think it has sort of standardized, you can offer certain prompts. So for the user to sort of say, hey, if you want to use, these are the best practices. And I think one of the coolest parts of it is the sampling feature, but like almost none of the clients implement it, which sort of allows the server to request an LLM call for the client back. So it's a bit of you flip the tables around and you can start building workflow-like things inside of it. So it's like, fundamentally, like if you showed an open API spec to a model, it would figure out, but MCP allows you to sort of take it a little bit further and speaks the language of a tool calling language model, basically.
Yeah, super, super nice. And I think today our plan is we build an MCP server, right? And
yes, I think today let's try to build a remote MCP server using the Cloudflare Agents SDK. So since launching Agents SDK, there's also a little toolkit to build your own MCP servers inside of the Cloudflare Agents SDK. And we can try and building one, see how far we can get, and kind of take it from there.
That sounds good. And Harshal says hi, and we say hi back. Cool. Thanks
Hi,
for
Harshal.
joining and watching.
Thanks for doing. Nice. All right, so I can share the screen and we can kind of start going about it. Let's see. So we'll just start with creating a Cloudflare project. And I see I'm running into some network issues, so I'm just gonna use the PnPm. We're gonna. What is the MCP server that we're building?
You said Blue Sky, right?
Yeah, my idea was to build one for Blue Sky, so it's something that I've already built, so it will be easy for me maybe to narrate through it. Blue Sky is a more open, short-form social media. I mean, pretty much everybody who's watching this will know what Blue Sky is. So I'm just going to go.
Is an alternative for Twitter or X.
Yes.
You can.
Yes. It's the in my opinion more wholesome alternative.
If you are not there yet, and if you're watching this, make sure also to be on Blue Sky. Okay, cool. So you set up Cloudflare.
Yes, I'm basically running the simplest setup. So they have some examples and templates. That's great, but I often find like you create this template and then you have like, okay, now I have like a whole bunch of code to read to understand what's going on. So let's try to sort of build it from scratch by just sort of adding the dependencies so you can kind of see how stuff layers in. Tempted to immediately deploy it, but maybe let's do that later. Let's see. This is something that I just created, so we can open up in Cursor. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit.
Yeah, that's good. I can see it at least.
Yes, and so now we have a basic, the classic worker. So if we run bun, well, we're not actually using bun, I forget. We're using PnPm. And if we hit that URL, this should work. Yes, okay.
Yeah, that'll work, yeah. Nice.
So the first thing I think I'll install all the dependencies and we'll set up the initial MCP server that we can connect to with the MCP inspector and just see that like, okay, this thing is live. It will not have any tools or anything, but just so we sort of get the next step up from Hello World. So we're gonna let's add Honc in case we need some routing. We're gonna add agents. We're gonna add model context protocol SDK. So this is the SDK that drives the whole interface for the model context protocol. We're going to add model context protocol inspector, and we're going to add proto API. So add proto API is the client for Blue Sky's API, which we'll use to add the tools. So let's add those. All right, and now if we open up package.json, we'll see that. We can actually delete the workers types because this is something that in the, I think the latest Wrangler already has, so we can remove that. And I'm also going to remove it from the tsconfig so that we don't get complaints. We are getting complaints, so what we need to do is run pncf typed-in so that the types are generated. And yes,
there you go.
Okay, we're in the green. Cool. Let me format this so that we're in a good spot. I can maybe would be helpful is to pull up the. I already had a bit of a prep, but as always, the Cloudflare Agents MCP, the documentation for that is available in here. Let's see, can I paste this in the chat? Show in the chat.
Try it. If not, I can.
Let's see.
Can you paste something?
Let me try. I'm signing into StreamYard. I guess I need to. An error occurred, but it's not your fault. Well, that's helpful. Let me
put it in the. I can put it in the comment, and we can also update our description after the stream. So whatever you show, I make sure it ends in the chat or in the description.
Nice. I see Harshal commented, curious to how you handle Hoth. I think today we're probably not going to handle it. We're just going to leave it open. But we might do another one. I think it's an interesting and challenging problem that I think the model context protocol developers are still working through it themselves. So I agree, it's an interesting one to handle.
I mean, we do that weekly, right? So we could also pick it up next week and see how far we get with auth.
Yeah.
But I think it's good to start first with we need some Flash before we need authentication. Well.
Yeah. Let's at least give this model context protocol at least one tool and then see how we can add authentication to it. So I think this is actually like a good snippet to just sort of paste over. This is from the API reference itself, and this sort of provides like a good little starter. So in the same file, I like to work. This is actually new. The Cloudflare model context protocol. I have not seen this, so I'm actually not going to use it. But let me close that. What the MCP agent is under the hood is a durable object. And so a lot of the, when we define that in the source code, we'll need to sort of explicitly state that in Wrangler. So this is like a basic, at the entry point, we export the class just like how we would export the any durable object or an agent. We can call this Blue Sky context server.
And I mean, it comes already with the first tool, right? Which is an add tool for calculating numbers. So as an example, I guess it wants to show you here is where you would place your tools.
Yeah. This is actually like I think this is sort of enough as like as a little bit of a boilerplate. I'm realizing I forgot one dependency, which is Zod. That's always good to add. So let me just add that. And then this should stop complaining. Yeah, there we go. By itself, like we've sort of did most of the work. This will fail still because we need to actually add it in the Wrangler JSON as well.
So here we bind basically to our, like what you said under the hood, durable objects, but that's our MCP server basically.
Yeah. I remember that they have that MCP servers have like a specific binding under the hood that I'm afraid to lose now. So I'm just going to copy that from an existing example project. Yeah, it's called MCP object. That's the binding. Okay. It's still like a lot of this, it's still in early development, so things are getting ironed out. But we can sort of follow that, and then because we are not using MyMCP, we're using Blue Sky Context Server. Ooh, I didn't want to change that. Okay. We've now defined sort of basic durable object. That is our MCP server. And if we spin up the application, at least we shouldn't get an error.
No model, I think hooks, okay.
That's the compatibility flags, Node.js compat. Right, there we go. We can actually run types again so that it doesn't complain. We get the MCP object generated. And now if we run this, it's starting up.
It's a question because I have a question now because I don't know, you added the inspector to it, right? Is that the tool where you could also already see it if you run it locally or not?
Not yet. So this was actually, so what we find now is like we have this running in the runtime. But we haven't exposed anything. Like our whole application, the entry point is still just a hello world fetch. And so now what we need to do is sort of expose that so that an inspector or any kind of agent that supports remote MCP could access that. So let's do that. Yeah. Let's do that. So we'll need to add a couple of routes, and we've added Honc, so we can just use that. Oh, I thought it would pick that up. And then let's see, export default fetch. So now in a remote setting, there's been some changes since March how MCPs can be accessed. So it used to be you needed two endpoints, a /SSC and /MCP or /messages, I believe, because one was where the server where the client would connect to and then just listen for any responses from the server, and it would use the other endpoint to send the requests. So it would say, give me the tools that you have, or give me the resources that you have, or call this tool. Like it would sort of use two endpoints for communication, which is kind of like using two different phones. So it's not very efficient, so to speak. Recently, the spec has changed, and they now support streamable HTTP, which means that they can just use the same single endpoint, which sort of simplifies and flattens out a lot of stuff, especially for stateless architectures. I think in this case, I'm honestly going to copy something from the example where they still use the two different endpoints, but I think the Agents SDK supports. I'm pretty sure I've seen a blog post where they support the most recent, where you only need one endpoint for that.
Okay, but I mean, I guess still it's valid to do it with both, right? So if so
I believe, let's try with this. And now we can take the Blue Sky context server. I think it's serve CP. Actually, good question. Let's take a look at how we have this in this. So this is there's another good resource. There's a Cloudflare repo called Cloudflare/AI. I'm going to paste the link to the chat, where you can see a bunch of examples, Auth-less, the one that we're looking at today, but also other ones that use the Cloudflare's MCP.
Yeah, Harshal mentioned, by the way, it's OAuth that he could normally use with workers, but his experience with Blue Sky was especially not fun. So
yeah. There's a side note. Blue Sky is especially tricky for OAuth, because in most cases, let's say you use something like GitHub, you can just register the OAuth client library, and then the GitHub API sort of is happy to take that forward. In the Blue Sky sense, you need to expose a few more routes, because they take a bit of a different approach to OAuth implementation. I'm super happy to get into that at some point, because I'm actually still figuring this out myself for my stuff. But it does make it does open a few more headaches in this, because there are more requests back and forth, and there's already a lot of different components in this, where the client requests to the server goes upstream, comes back, and you're just like, okay, where does my request go now?
But I guess that's a good pickup. Once you figured that out, you have to come back to the stream so we can see what you figured out. So,
yeah, we can take it forward there.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. So this is basically the example. I could just paste this, but I wanted to use Honc in this case. This is the entry point that we wanted to figure out. So let me just paste this in a comment so I have a reference. And then let's see, c.rec. And I don't think we need the execution context. Maybe we do. I see. Let's see if this works. I'm curious. I've never tried it with Honc before.
Let's try.
So we mounted one endpoint, which is the /MCP. And then let me close the terminal. There's another endpoint. So this is the one that we've already mounted. And then we should mount another one that is the SSE.
It still doesn't like your execution context, but is that a type error? What you get there?
Yeah, this seems to be a type mismatch. Let's see if this. I don't think this should cause any issues, but that's famous last words. Okay, So let me restart the server. We can, oh, right. So the other thing that I need to do is add I'm going to add an inspector. So we've added our, we have the model context protocol inspector dependency.
Mm-hmm.
And so now if in another terminal tab, not button, we run pn inspector, let's see if this, yes, it spins up. Okay.
Oh, nice. And now it's basically an inspector for the client, right? So you can see what it offers.
Yeah. So this would be sort of, we can say 8787. This is our role. And then now we can start. Ooh. I think we're getting a 404.
I'm
not sure. The streamable HTTP. What about SSE?
Post as a message. Why is there a message on the?
Right. So this is where that's where it's using the old. I think this would then need to be. Yeah. Right. This is where
Okay.
it takes either /SSE or /SSE/message. So let me just forward everything into that. Nope, that still didn't work. It still doesn't find, no. It's sort of complaining that the server is not running. Let me, okay, let's try the streamable HTTP, which I believe should be MCP. Yes, there we go. Okay.
Oh, there we go.
So actually, which makes sense, we're using the more modern version of it. Let me maybe just comment that out then.
So we are going with the only one endpoint.
Yeah.
Okay.
If we're not getting any tools, which is I'm not quite sure why. Request timed out. Because we do have certain tools that we've added to this that we should be able to see at least the add tool. Let's see. What do we have here? Let me actually, I'll keep this running here. And I'll just spin up it on a separate tab so we can see a little better. Let's reconnect again.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah. Oh, there it is. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So if we can run this tool and we see the success. So that's at least the to recap what we've done so far is we've set up a basic Cloudflare application with Honc. We've added the MCP server class in the Wrangler JSON and in our source code that has one tool, and we've added a route that any client that supports MCP capabilities, like an inspector or like would be another agent, they can access that. Do we have time to get into the blue sky stuff? I'm looking at the clock now, and it's like
I'm also
30
looking
seconds.
at the clock. Would you be up? I mean, we have the basic setup. What we could do is we could already think of the tools that we want to give it, and then next week we implement them. Would you be up for learning next week again as well?
Yeah, we can do that. We can do this next week. We can let me open up as like a little So where I was going to go next, and where we can go next week, is we can basically pull up the Blue Sky API docs, and then kind of start to see what endpoints we want to add into this, what kind of information we want to pull, and then start getting into the add proto SDK.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, and maybe then the week afterwards we figured out authentication, or you figured out authentication, and then it that makes it serious. But I think that's quite cool, because with this basic setup you showed us today, everyone potentially can now decide what MCP server do you want to build. Is it Blue Sky or is it something else? I think the magic then happens within the tools you define. But this is a really cool setup to get started with. Yeah, I would say thanks for this. Thanks for the introduction, because I haven't looked into this. Now I feel more firm into maybe also come up with an MCP server. And I'm really looking forward to continue next week building this.
Awesome. Thanks.
Cool. And with that, let's see everyone next week.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.